So we are going to continue on. It is the second hour of lesson 4. So we've designed our database models. And now what we want to do is we want to translate this kind of visual picture into actual models in Visual Studio Code. Sorry, in Visual Studio. So we've got our category model already. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to together create the order model because it's kind of the biggest one. And then I'm going to have we'll sort of divide up the class a little bit, and you guys can design the different models, and then we'll put them all together. So let's go to Visual Studio. We've got our category model here. So I want to make a new model called order, and then we're going to use this kind of definition in our diagram to create the model class. So I'm going to right-click my models folder, and I'm going to add a class. Go ahead and follow along with me. And I'm just going to call the class order with a capital O and singular, so there's no S on the end. Your class is just called order. And now we get a new file that's also in the models namespace with a public class called order. So now we want to define the properties of our order. So our first property is going to be our order ID, which will be our primary key. And all of our properties are going to have this get and set because we can both read the values and write the values. We're going to have an order date. And all of the property names are going to start with a capital. Sure. I'll show that in 1 second, Colton. We're going to have a decimal number for the total. So that will allow dollars and cents. So to create the class, go in your Solution Explorer, you'll just right-click on Models, and you just choose Add a Class, and name it Order with a capital O. That help? I will post this code up to GitHub as well, but follow along the best that you can, because the more you practice doing it, the more you're comfortable you're going to do, and you'll be designing and creating your own models in your assignment too. So now we're going to get to the customer information and the order. So we're going to have a whole bunch of string properties here. So we'll have a string for first name and last name. We probably should also define all of these fields as being required, right? We don't want an order without a customer name and a full address. So I'm going to use the required attribute above pretty much all the rest of the fields. Now Visual Studio is giving me an error here. It doesn't like this. It doesn't recognize this required attribute. So how do I fix this? So I get this red underline. If I try to build my site, I'm going to get some build errors. Required attribute and required could not be found. Are you missing an assembly reference? Yeah, thanks, Tushar. Yeah, we need a using statement or an import. So I could manually add it at the top, but Visual Studio will tell me, if I just put my mouse over it, I get this little yellow light bulb with the red X little. So I click on it, and it wants me to make a reference to system.componentModel.data annotations. So I'll just click on that suggestion. It adds this reference here on line 3. I'll put that code in the chat as well. So you could also just add that code manually, and now my red underlines go away and my required keyword, it turns blue. So we're going to put in a bunch more string values here. Address. And city. So this is just kind of like monotonous grunt work. We've already done the thinking. We've already planned it out. We're just now writing the code implementation of our database diagram. We'll have address, city, province, and maybe we can even add a little bit of other validation here. We could say, for example, so only 2 characters for province. So this will make the column in the database only 2 characters long, and it won't accept values any bigger than 2 characters. Our postal code will also be required. We'll say our max length here is, I don't know, 10. So I'm really just repeating the same thing, and then we've got 3 more fields here. We've got the phone number, the email address, and then the payment code. Our max length for phone number, maybe we'll just put it in as 15. And usually I want to use a string for the phone number because it's not like, we don't treat it like a number. We're not going to do math. We're not going to add 2 phone numbers together. Or we may have a phone number like 1-888-ASK-RICH, where someone uses their letters representation. So we'll also have the customer ID. Now you might think the customer ID should be an integer. We'll see a little bit later why it's a string. We're going to use the built-in table for the built-in users table that comes with ASP.NET Identity, and that actually creates like a long hash string for the customer IDs, so they're unique. So we'll store it as a string. And then we've got one last one that isn't required. And that's just so that, for example, the owners of the store could process orders. Maybe they're taking payments offline. So the payment code can be optional. I'll put this whole file up on Pastebin, the whole class that goes inside the namespace. So if that typing is getting away on you a bit, you can grab it. I'll put the link in the chat. So you can just copy this if you need to. That's totally fine. It just needs to go inside the curly braces on line 8 and line 46. So there's our class. So this was the biggest one that we did together. So let's see here. How many people do we have in the room? Okay, so we got 13 people left, including me. So here's what we're going to do to design the other classes. Rather than me going through each of them, what we're going to do, I'm just going to use briefly, about 10 minutes should be enough time. I'm just going to create 3 sort of random breakout rooms, and you'll automatically get assigned to one of them. If you are assigned to breakout room 1, you're going to work together to design the pet model. And I'll put this in the chat as well. If you are in breakout room 2, you're going to work together using the diagram that I've shared on Blackboard, and I'll keep it up on my screen. You're going to design the cart item model. And if you're in breakout room 3, work together to create the order detail model. So you shouldn't need more than, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes. I'll ask one person to share their screen, and you can just work together, and then we can just share the code. So each group is going to design one of the 3 remaining models. Breakout room 1 is doing the pet model, breakout room 2 doing cart item, and breakout room 3 is doing order detail. So I will pause the recording. I'll start the breakout rooms. This shouldn't take very long. Maybe just shoot me a message through there or call me in when your model is done. Okay, so I'm going to start the breakout rooms, and you will randomly get put in to one of the 3 rooms. And resume. Okay, so I'm going to ask if somebody who is in breakout session 1 would be able to share the pet model that your group designed. You could either paste the model class in the chat, or you could put it up on pastebin.com and share a link with us in the chat. So what the rest of us can do is go ahead and create this empty file. So Colton will get to go through the process again a few more times, but then we can copy and paste the code. So if everybody in your Solution Explorer, you can right-click on your models folder and choose, again, add a class. And we're going to call this class pet with a capital P. So would somebody who is in breakout session 1 be able to share with us the contents of your pet class? Okay, so that's popped up in the chat. Thanks, Ralph. So I'm going to copy what's here. I'll copy that class definition. From the chat. So I'll just replace this class here. Okay, so we've got name, color, age, price. Okay. So that's a good start. We'll need to do a few things here. Couple small additions. What do we do to get rid of these errors? Thanks, group 1. That looks pretty good, I think. Couple additions, and I'm going to recommend maybe one small change. Yep, so again, we'll do the import. Thanks, Jordan and Tushar. So again, you can manually add the reference to system.componentmodel.data annotations, or you can just use the Visual Studio helper. Now we are missing one important property. What's missing here? If we go and look at our diagram, we are missing one property. Well, we've got the foreign key, but what should probably the first column be? That every table, every model is going to need. Yeah, right, we'll need the primary key, so I'm just going to add that at the top. Int at ID in Pascal case. I don't need to set it as required. If it has this name, just our model name and .id, it will automatically be required and set as the primary key. So we're going to go ahead and add that property. I'm just going to put in a U in the word color because I will misspell it if it's got the American spelling without the U. And one small change, I think, on line 24. What should we modify on line 24 with our category ID? What type of data will these ID fields be? Yeah, let's change it because in category, right, the category ID, it's an integer. So we're going to change that. So our category ID, our foreign key column should be an integer. Okay, David, really good question. Why do we have in order? The reason is this table that gets generated automatically by Visual Studio, it uses a string for the primary key. It doesn't just use, so our users are not going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Every user ID is going to be like X, A, B, like it's a random string for security. And that's going to come from a built-in table, which we'll see a little bit later today. So I'll come back to your question and we'll look at it. No, not for the other ones. That's because this table is auto-generated by Visual Studio, by the identity library. So there's our pet model. Looks good. Our primary key, name. All right, excellent. I don't know if we would actually use max length here because max length is for strings. This is an integer, so instead we probably want a range instead. So we've got a minimum, let's say, of 0 and a maximum of maybe 99. So I'm just going to change that. Because it's not the length of a string, it's actually a numeric value. Maybe we also, okay, so that's probably good enough for now. We may make some other changes to this later, but I've just changed line 20 to a range. So thank you, group 1. That's a really good looking pet model. So we just made a few little adjustments to it, but overall, this looks great. So maybe I could ask somebody who is in breakout session 2, if you could please share the cart item class. I'll push all this stuff up to GitHub in a minute as well. We'll have to make a few little adjustments here. So I'll push it when we're all done. Actually, you know what? Screw it. I can do it right now. If I have to make a bunch of commits, that's fine. Okay, so it's lesson 4, part 1. So these will be our first models. So I'll put this up on GitHub. So you can go to my Positive Pets repository if you need any of the work we've done so far. Okay, thank you, David. Now the only thing, well, I'm going to grab this class. And I'm going to go ahead and make a cart item class. But remember, our model name should always be singular. So I'm going to right-click models again. I'm going to add a class. And I'll call it cart item, but no S on the end. So our naming convention is that the models are singular. So I'm going to paste in that code David put in the chat, but again, I'm going to rename that class. I want it to be singular. Okay. So again, we're going to make our reference to our data annotations. I could see one addition and one change that I'm going to recommend. What should we add to this model? And there's one property I think we're just going to need to change. Right, because the table name will be plural. So Visual Studio will take our cart item model, which represents one object. It will build a cart items plural table. That's the naming convention. So model names are singular, table names are plural. So there's one property we definitely need here. What's that? Again, if we look at our diagram, right, we still need a primary key field here. So we'll want to add a cart item ID as our first property. So let's go ahead and add that cart item ID as our primary key field. Oops. And I would suggest one small change on line 17. What should we change on 17? This will work, but it's probably not ideal. So we can have a price column that holds an integer. What change should we make to this? Let's take a look at the pet model for a moment.
Decimal, it's in chat.
Pardon me?
Yeah, make it decimal from in.
Yeah, so if it's in the pet table, it's a decimal. Why would it be better that it's a decimal here as well? What's wrong with making it an integer? So when we're dealing with prices, we might have dollars and cents. So it might be a fraction of a whole number. So this should be a decimal. So we'll want to change the price from an integer to a decimal. And there's our cart item model. So I can upload this. And then we'll also need our order detail model. So if I could ask somebody from breakout room 3, if you could please share the order detail model that your group designed. So we've created 4 of our 5 models. I'm going to right-click my models. Again, I'm going to add a class called order detail. And then we'll need the model definition in here. Anybody from group breakout room 3 able to share what this model looks like?
Rich, I don't know if you can see chat right now.
It's not update. Oh, sorry. It's weird. It's slow. Thanks. Thank you,
Yeah,
Colton.
it's kind of ignored
Yes,
all
I
the
do
people
see
saying
it.
decimal and then
It wasn't
ignored the other
updating
person
for
for
me.
class.
Sorry about that. Okay, so now I'll. So here's the
What the heck?
class. Okay, so let's look at what's here. So we've
Sorry,
got
that's the
our,
wrong one. I posted that, but I messed up the
okay, so I
when
do
I was
have it,
copying.
yes. Okay, no problem. I'll undo that. Coulter, I see yours. So let me just undo. And I see your definition here.
Okay, here. I'll post you the. I just posted what should be the entire one there. I don't know. I got mixed up with a bunch of things. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. They're pretty close. I've got it here. We're going to just adjust it a little bit. But thanks, Jordan. I see it now. Pretty close to what we've got. So we've got our primary key field, which is good. It matches the model name exactly with ID on the end. Our quantity, I think we may want this to be an integer because I don't think we can buy 1.5 dogs. We'll probably allow whole numbers only, so we can just maybe modify that to be an integer. We've got a price. We've got our order ID, which is our first foreign key, and our pet ID. Okay, great. And then we can just, again, add our reference. So that looks pretty good. Thank you, group 3. Thanks, Coulter and Jordan. Whoops, and here, this should be order detail. I mistyped mine. I make typing mistakes all the time, so I will fix it because it should be called order detail. So I'm going to publish all these changes up to GitHub. 3. Now we're mostly done building these models, but not quite entirely. But now our definitions, they pretty much match the diagram we created. So if step 1 was design the diagram, figure out what the models are, what each model looks like, then build the models in Visual Studio. We've done those 2 steps, but the one thing we haven't done is we still have to add these relationships in our models. So we're going to go and modify each of them to represent these relationships. So I'm going to start here in the category model we did last week. I'm actually going to take out these 2 lines because this is a primary key field. These values are generated automatically, so we don't actually need these. So I'm going to take those out. So because one category can have many pets, we need to add this relationship into the model. One category, many pets. So this indicates that each category can have a list of 1 or more pets. So it is the parent of this relationship. So we're going to go ahead and add this line. Go ahead and add this at the bottom of your category model. So we built the model last week, and now we're adding this relationship to it. So this is one half of the relationship, the parent half. Our next step, we need to go to the pet model, and we need to represent the many side of our relationship. So we're going to do that next. So I've added the comment on line 17, and then the child reference on line 18. So now our MVC framework knows there's a connection between category and pet. Once you've added this code, we're going to go back to our pet model. And we are going to add parent reference to category. Category. So every pet has a singular category. So each category has a list of pets, but each pet has only one category. So notice I didn't use the word list here. So we've modeled both sides of the relationship now. Category is the parent and pet is the child. We'll now need to add the other relationships that we have. So here's our diagram. So we've taken care of this relationship. We've also got a one-to-many relationship here, don't we? Pet is a parent of cart item. Because let's say Chris and we can both put the same pet or kind of pet in our cart at the same time. So one pet can appear in many cart items. Pets are also apparent to the order details. Right? One pet can be ordered multiple times. So this pet model is kind of interesting. It's a child of this relationship, but it's the parent in this one and this one. So we're going to add child refs. One pet, many cart items, one pet, many order details. So every pet can have a list of cart items. It can also belong in a list of order detail records. So our pet's kind of like this central hub. It's really the focal point of our entire database. It's connected to 3 of the other 4 models. It's a child in this relationship, and it's a parent in this relationship and this relationship. And mapping all this out, this is why our diagram is so helpful, for us to visualize any of this before we try and write any code. We can map it all out so we can see it. So our category model and our pet model, these are done now. We now need to add the relationships to our other 3 models. So we've said cart item, our relationship is one pet, many cart items. So we're going to go to the cart item and add our parent reference. So every cart item has a pet. We'll need the same parent reference in order detail. Every order detail also is related or connected to a specific pet. So these new lines on 25 and 30, they've got to go in the order detail model as well. So I'll actually copy those lines. I'll go to order detail. Order detail has a second parent reference. One order so every order detail also has an order. And we can see order detail's got two foreign keys. It's got order ID and pet ID. So it has a parent object of an order and a parent object of a pet. Just bring up my diagram. So order detail's got these two foreign keys, and it's on the many side of the pet to order detail relationship and the many side of orders order details. We also need the parent side of this relationship. The last thing we need is our order model. Now we'll need our child reference, one order, many order details. So here we're going to use a list because one order can have a whole bunch of details. So this is going to go at the bottom of our order model. So we've now set up all four of the relationships that we created in our diagram. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4 relationships. So we've modeled each of them from both the parent side and the child side. I'm going to push all this stuff. So models with relationships. So I'm going to push all those changes up to GitHub. I know we did a fair bit of work in the models, and what we're doing here is new. I recognize that. So I've uploaded all that code to GitHub. This was the hardest part of what we need to do today. Designing the diagram, building the models, and creating these relationship links. So it is unfamiliar. But this should set us up for a lot of things to get generated for us automatically moving forward. So we're partway done the process. We've done the heavy lifting. We have some more to do when we come back. We need to connect our web project to the database, and then we can actually build the tables in the database that are mapped to each one of these models. We see in Solution Explorer, we've got 5 models we created. We can ignore this one. It's here by default, the error model. And then we can start actually creating data in our SQL Server database. So everything we've done so far is uploaded to GitHub. So if you miss something in the model, if you're a bit behind, you can grab any of that code from the Git repository. And let's take a break here, and we'll continue on connecting this up to our database when we come back. Okay, so let's take a break, and we'll resume in 10.